If you've ever been the child everyone leaned on but no one truly showed up for, you're going to recognize pieces of yourself in what I'm about to tell you. And before the story is over, you'll understand exactly why I walked away from my entire family, even after they begged and tried to buy me back with money they should have given me years ago. If any part of this hits you in that quiet place you don't talk about, please like, share, and subscribe, because my last straw might help someone else see theirs a little sooner. My name is Natalie Carter, and I grew up in one of those picture-perfect Southern families in Charleston, South Carolina. On paper, we were a legacy family: historic house, generational wealth, invitations to fundraisers and galas, our last name on plaques in old churches and art museums. People used to tell me, "You're so lucky, Natalie. Your family has everything." And for a long time, I believed them. The thing about growing up in a family like mine is that money becomes invisible until the moment someone tells you it's not available for you. As a kid, I didn't really understand what we had. I just knew that the things my friends called expensive were normal in our house, and the problems other people had, overdraft fees, choosing between rent and groceries, sounded like stories from another planet. I was the oldest, the trailblazer, first to drive, first to leave for college, first to bring home straight A's and acceptance letters. My parents used to introduce me as our overachiever with this strange mix of pride and distance, like they were bragging about a show dog they didn't actually pet. I convinced myself that being first meant I was special. I didn't realize, not yet, that in their world, being first meant I was the one they could afford to push the hardest and help the least. The night everything cracked for me was my father's 70th birthday. The ballroom glowed with amber light and crystal. There was a jazz band, champagne, tiny crab cakes, old money on display. My father stood in the center of it all, like a king in his court, his silver hair combed back, his navy suit tailored within an inch of its life. People kept coming up to him, clapping him on the shoulder. "Richard, you've done well. You built such a beautiful family. You must be proud." He'd gesture toward us, my mother, my siblings, and me, and smile the same practiced smile he used for fundraisers and press photos. I stood next to my younger sister, Brooke, trying not to think about the fact that my dress had been bought on clearance and altered at home, while hers had come from a boutique where they don't even bother putting price tags on things. The speeches started after dessert. Brooke was the first one to take the microphone. Of course she was. She loved moments like this, where the room became her stage and our father became her favorite prop. "Most daughters dream of a fairy tale wedding," she said, smiling wide enough that the diamonds at her ears winked under the lights. I didn't have to dream. I had Dad. Laughter rippled through the crowd. He paid for everything. The venue, the dress, the band, the honeymoon. I didn't lift a finger. I just showed up. People laughed. They clapped. My father raised his glass in a modest little shrug, like it had been nothing. Then my younger brother, Tyler, took the microphone. Law school wasn't cheap. My first house definitely wasn't. But Dad never hesitated. When I got into Duke, he said, "Your job is to succeed. I'll handle the rest." When Amanda and I found our house, he wired the down payment before we'd even signed the papers. Everything I am today, I owe to him. The applause this time was louder. People at nearby tables turned and looked at me, nodding, like they were expecting me to glow with shared gratitude. Someone behind me leaned over and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Natalie must be so grateful. She was the first one he launched." I smiled on instinct. Years of training. Smile at church. Smile in photographs. Smile when people praise your parents. Smile when they compare you to your siblings. Smile so they don't ask questions. My lips moved into the right shape, even as my stomach twisted into something sharp and ugly. Because while my brother was talking about law school that had been paid in full, I was thinking about the nights I'd fallen asleep on a stained mattress in a cramped off campus apartment after a double shift at a diner, with my laptop still open beside me and my wrists aching from carrying trays. While my sister bragged about a wedding she hadn't paid a dime for, I was remembering the hours I'd spent on the phone with my student loan servicer, trying not to cry as they explained how long it would take to pay off the numbers on the screen. If anyone in that room had asked me, I could have told them exactly how much I still owed: $42,319. I knew the number like my own birthday. But no one asked. The band started up again, and people drifted back into their little clusters, talking about business and vacations and golf. My father made a slow circuit of the room, receiving compliments like tributes. I slipped out onto a balcony that overlooked the water and gripped the railing until my knuckles went white. I told myself the same story I'd been telling myself for 15 years. They had less money back then, when I went to college. The market hadn't bounced back yet. Dad's business was still recovering. They did the best they could with what they had, and by the time Brooke and Tyler needed help, things were different. It wasn't favoritism, it was timing. That was all. Timing. I repeated the word like a prayer, like an excuse, like a sedative. But for the first time, it didn't quite put me to sleep. Over the next few weeks, the family group chat became a highlight reel of my parents' generosity, except none of it involved me. Brooke sent photos of her and her husband in front of a beach cottage. Closing day. Dad surprised us with the last bit of the down payment we needed. I'm literally crying. Tyler followed up with a selfie in front of a shiny new SUV. Guess who just got an upgrade? Dad said we needed something safer for the baby. He just wired it. Who does that? Little hearts appeared under their messages. Fire emojis. Champagne glass gifts. My father replied, "Proud of you both." My mother added, "You two deserve it. Hard work pays off." I stared at the screen, sitting in my small rented townhouse, the dishwasher rattling, the couch sagging, the bathroom ceiling needing repainting. I didn't want to be the bitter sister. I didn't want to be the one who couldn't be happy for them. But the molehill of discomfort I'd been standing on for years suddenly felt like a mountain, and I was teetering on the edge. My thumb hovered over the keyboard of my phone for a long time before I typed the message. Just one sentence. "Hey, do you think you could help me finish paying my student loans? It would really change my situation." I deleted it, rewrote it, softer. "Hey, Dad, I've been doing the best I can with my loans, but things are tight. If there's any way you could help with a little of what's left, I'd be really grateful." I stared at that version, then hit send before I could overthink it. The message went through. The little delivered checkmark appeared. The timestamp ticked to 1 minute past, then 5, then 10. I got up. I washed dishes. I checked my email. I folded laundry that didn't need folding. I checked my phone again, pretending I wasn't checking it. An hour passed. 2. 3. Finally, my phone buzzed. My father's name lit up the screen. "You chose to be independent, Natalie," his message read. "Don't rewrite it now because you're uncomfortable with the consequences. We helped where we could. You've always prided yourself on standing on your own 2 feet. I respect that." Respect. That word burned more than if he'd just said no. I stared at the message until the text blurred. Independence. Like it had been a selfish choice instead of a necessity. Like I had turned down offers that were never made. The next Sunday, we had dinner at my parents' house the way we did once a month. The house smelled like my childhood. We sat around the long dining table underneath the portrait of my grandfather that had been there my whole life, his painted eyes watching everything. Brooke was talking about renovations for the beach cottage. Dad says we should knock down the wall between the kitchen and the living room, make it more open concept. He wants to bring in his contractor. Tyler chimed in. He's right, though. The man knows houses. Did you see how he negotiated the closing costs? It was like watching a surgeon. I tried to focus on my plate, on cutting my chicken into neat little pieces, on chewing and swallowing without choking on resentment. Then Brooke laughed and said, "Besides, Natalie doesn't need help like we do. She's the strong one. She's been out there doing it on her own forever." The table chuckled. My father smiled. My mother shrugged, almost fondly, as if it were a compliment. I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? Stand up and scream that my strength was not an excuse to neglect me? Admit that my independence had come with panic attacks in grocery store parking lots and nights spent calculating whether I could afford a car repair and groceries in the same week? I excused myself to go to the bathroom. My legs carried me down the hallway on autopilot. On the way, I passed my father's office. The door was cracked open. Inside, the desk lamp was still on, casting a cone of light over stacks of paper and an open leather portfolio. I shouldn't have looked, I know that, but something in me, some creature that had been asleep for years, stirred and stepped closer. On the desk, in that open portfolio, lay a document with my father's name at the top in bold letters. Below it, in formal, unemotional language, were the words, "Last Will and Testament." My heart thudded in my ears. I told myself to turn away. Instead, I drifted closer. I didn't touch the paper. I didn't have to. The important part was already visible. Brooke Carter, primary beneficiary, Trust Distribution A, real property, 50% interest in family estate at 17 Ashley Lane. Investment portfolio, 30% of Carter Holdings brokerage account. Tyler Carter, primary beneficiary, Trust Distribution A. Real property, 50% interest in family estate at 17 Ashley Lane. Investment portfolio, 30% of Carter Holdings brokerage account. Business interests, 40% of Carter and Pierce Consulting. My eyes moved down. Natalie Carter, beneficiary, category C. Cash disbursement, fixed amount to be determined at time of execution, not to exceed 10% of liquid assets. No interest in family estate property. No interest in primary investment portfolio. Category C. I felt my stomach lurch. The room seemed to tilt. I stepped back, hit the doorframe with my shoulder, and forced myself to breathe. I made it to the bathroom, locked the door, and threw up into the sink. My makeup smeared under my eyes. I stared at my reflection and thought, over and over, it's not just timing. It's not just timing. I drove home that night in silence, the kind of silence that hums and crackles and waits to turn into a storm. For days, I moved like a ghost. I went to work, I answered emails, I smiled at customers, I replied with thumbs-up emojis in the family group chat, but underneath all of that, something relentless had started grinding away at the foundation of the story I'd been living in. If they had truly been broke when I went to college, that would have hurt, but it would have been understandable. But the will, the category, the way my siblings had been installed as heirs to the kingdom while I'd been quietly written into a footnote, those things weren't about timing. They were about choice. One night, after staring at my ceiling instead of sleeping, I got out of bed, pulled an old box down from the top of my closet, and opened it on the living room floor. It was full of paperwork I'd hauled with me from apartment to apartment, school records, old tax documents, medical bills. At 17, I'd had a health scare that turned into a full-blown emergency. severe abdominal pain, a collapse in the kitchen, an ambulance ride, emergency surgery. I remembered my father's tight jaw, my mother's tears. I remembered them telling me, after, that the medical bills had wiped them out, that college would be tight because they'd had to choose between saving my life and saving for the future. I had carried that guilt for years. Every time I signed my name on a loan document, every time I counted tip money in a cramped apartment, I told myself, at least you're alive. At least they chose you. Now I spread the papers out on the floor. Hospital invoices, insurance summaries, statements with dark blue logos. The hospital bill was large. The number made my throat tighten. But next to it, a separate stack of pages told a different story. Insurance payment, $84,600. Patient responsibility, $1,750. I checked it again. The vast majority had been covered. I flipped to the next set of documents, a packet of financial statements from a brokerage firm. The dates caught my eye. 3 months after my surgery, 2 new accounts had been opened. Account opening form, beneficiary, Brooke Carter. Initial deposit, $50,000. Account opening form, beneficiary, Tyler Carter. Initial deposit, $50,000. Over the next few years, those accounts saw additional deposits, notes in the margins, wedding, grad school, future home. Nowhere was there an account with my name on it. Not one. I sat back on my heels, surrounded by paper, and laughed. It came out as a sharp, broken sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. So I wasn't too expensive, I whispered. I was just optional. Tears came then. For a few minutes, I let myself feel it all. The humiliation, the anger, the grief for a version of my parents that had never existed. Then, slowly, another feeling crept in. Curiosity. If the story they'd told me about my surgery wasn't true, what else wasn't true? I didn't call them, not yet. If I confronted them without more than this, they'd drown me in explanations and guilt. So instead, I called someone else. Steely resolve. I made an appointment with a financial advisor who specialized in families and trusts. I found her online, a woman named Lauren. In her office, I laid out what I had. She flipped through the documents, asked questions, made notes. Okay, she said finally. I'm not a lawyer, but there are a few possibilities. None of them are flattering to your parents. Such as? I asked. They could have genuinely believed they were broke at that time, and when things improved, they decided to correct course by investing heavily in your siblings. Emotionally cruel, but not necessarily illegal. Or, she paused, they decided you were going to be the independent one and that their money was better spent positioning your siblings to maintain the family assets. Like choosing favorites, I said. Like choosing successors, she replied. I stared at my hands. Is there anything I can do? Do you know if you're named in any of their trusts? She asked. I saw my name in the will, I said, under something called Category C. Her eyebrows rose. If your name appears in any legal document relating to their estate or trusts, you have standing to ask questions. If distributions have been grossly unequal, you may have grounds for some form of action, but you'd need an attorney who specializes in estate litigation. Litigation made my stomach flick. Just because you have the right to do something doesn't mean you're obligated to, she added, but you deserve to know the truth. I walked out feeling like I'd stepped onto a new continent. The ground was the same, but I could no longer pretend I didn't see the fault lines. I made another call, this time to a lawyer. His name was David Herrera, and he specialized in trust and estate disputes. I handed over the same documents, plus a summary Lauren helped me organize. David read in silence. "I'll be straightforward with you," he said. "What your parents did, if this is accurate, is morally ugly. Legally, it's more complicated. Parents are generally allowed to distribute assets however they want. However, if your name appears as a beneficiary, or if promised support was withheld in a way that violates fiduciary duties, we may have paths." "Where do we start?" I asked. "Information," he said. "Public records, trust documents. If that's not enough, we move toward discovery. That can involve subpoenas. It will change your relationship with your family." "It's already changing," I said. "I just want to stop feeling like I'm crazy." Weeks passed. By day, I went to work. At night, I answered questions from David's office and learned more about my parents' finances than I'd ever wanted to know. Public records revealed several trusts. Some had my siblings' names attached. Others had vague titles. My name appeared a few times, always at the bottom, always with language that made it clear I wasn't meant to inherit control of anything. More troubling were discrepancies between what documents said should have happened with certain funds and what current balances showed. There were patterns of disbursements that looked like they should have involved me, but didn't. That was when David brought in a forensic accountant. Her name was Priya. She treated my parents' finances the way a detective treats a crime scene. She built charts and timelines, tracing money from account to account. "Here," she said one afternoon, pointing to a line on a spreadsheet. "This trust was established when you were 14. You, Brooke, and Tyler are all listed as beneficiaries. Your father is the trustee. The schedule suggests that when each child reached 18, they were to receive a specific allocation toward education and housing." "I didn't get anything at 18, I said. She nodded. "I can see that. The records show disbursements when Brooke started college and again when Tyler did. For you, nothing. The funds that should have been allocated for you were instead redirected into a separate investment vehicle where your father is both trustee and beneficiary." "In English," I said. "In English," she said gently, "it looks like your father kept your share and later used it to fund your siblings more heavily." Something in me finally snapped into clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't misremembering. I was the designated sacrifice. I didn't go to my father first. I went to my mother. I caught her alone in the kitchen one weekday afternoon when my father was at the club and my siblings were elsewhere. She was arranging flowers when I walked in. "Mom," I said, closing the door behind me, "I want answers." I set a folder down on the kitchen island. It contained copies of the trust schedules, the disbursement records, the insurance summaries from my surgery. "I know about the trust that was supposed to help all three of us with education and housing," I said. "I know I never received my portion. I know those funds were redirected. I know insurance covered almost all of my surgery, even though you both told me it wiped you out. And I saw the will. I saw how I'm listed compared to Brooke and Tyler." Her hand went to her throat. "Natalie, you had no right." "I had every right," I said, my voice rising. "It's my life, my future, my past." She sank onto a stool, paling. "I need you to tell me the truth," I said. "All of it." Tears filled her eyes. "Your father never got over what happened when you were 17, she whispered. "The surgery?" I asked. "Yes. The night you collapsed, he thought he was going to lose you. He doesn't handle feeling out of control. He started saying that one event had nearly destroyed everything he was building. He was angry at everyone, and yes, sometimes at you. He said we couldn't put all our eggs in one basket, that we needed to make sure the others were secured. The others? I repeated. Like I was a bad investment? Tears spilled over. He said you were impulsive, emotional, that you took after me. He said if anything else went wrong in this family, it would be through you. So he decided Brooke and Tyler should be the ones to carry on the assets. He still loved you, Natalie. He just saw you as a risk. So his response to nearly losing me was to make sure I could never stand where they stood? I asked. He told himself he was protecting everyone, she whispered. He believed that by not spoiling you, he was forcing you to become resilient, self-sufficient. And you? I asked. What did you believe? I believed it was easier to let him do it than to fight him, she said. I told myself you were strong enough to handle it, that you didn't need the help like they did, that you'd be fine. I let out a short, harsh laugh. Well, congratulations. I survived. Does that make you feel better? Natalie, please, she said, reaching for me. I stepped back. Don't. You stood by while he took my share of the life you built and handed it to them. You watched me drown in debt and told yourselves I was learning independence. You let me carry the weight of a lie so you wouldn't have to feel bad. She sobbed quietly. I felt nothing but cold clarity. I'm not here to beg, I said. I'm here to tell you that I know, and that things are going to change. Her eyes widened. What are you going to do? I'm going to stop pretending this is a misunderstanding, I said, and I'm going to stop playing the strong, grateful daughter who doesn't need anything. The next phase of my life didn't look dramatic from the outside. I still got up, went to work, paid my bills. But behind the scenes, things were moving. David filed a petition in probate court, citing concerns about certain trusts in which I was a beneficiary. The filing triggered a requirement for my father as trustee to provide a full accounting. My father didn't find out immediately that I was behind it. When he did, he called me. How could you do this? He demanded. Do you have any idea how this makes us look? Dragging our family name into court like some trashy reality show? I learned from the best, I said evenly. You taught me appearances matter more than reality. I'm just adjusting the appearance to match the truth. You are ungrateful, he spat. Everything you have, I have because I worked for it, I cut in. You made damn sure of that. You were always the one who wanted to stand on your own 2 feet, he said. Now you're punishing us because we let you? I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm holding you accountable. He hung up. His attorneys tried to dismiss the petition as frivolous, the product of a disgruntled adult child. David responded with documentation. Priya's report spelled out the financial patterns in stark, unemotional language. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes, reviewed the evidence and ordered a temporary freeze on certain trust distributions until a full accounting could be completed. Deposition day was surreal. I sat at the end of a conference table, David at my right. Across from us, my father and his attorneys. My mother sat beside him, twisting a tissue. David's voice was steady as he walked my father through the history of the trusts. Is it correct that Trust 3A was established with all 3 of your children named as beneficiaries? David asked. Yes, my father said, stiffly. And is it correct that distributions were made from this trust when Brooke and Tyler reached 18? Yes. And were any distributions made to Natalie at that time? A pause. No, he said finally. Can you explain why? Natalie didn't need it in the same way, he said. She was always proud of being independent. She wanted to do things on her own. We respected that. The funds were better allocated where they would do the most good. For your other children, David said. For the family, my father corrected. And when the trust documents suggested a certain minimum distribution for each child, including Natalie, you instead transferred those funds into an investment vehicle in your own name. Is that correct? His attorney objected. The judge overruled. Yes, my father said tightly. It was within my discretion as trustee. Legally, perhaps, David said. Ethically? My father's eyes flashed. Ethics are subjective, Mr. Herrera. Numbers aren't, David replied. When it was my turn to testify, my hands shook a little, but my voice stayed steady. I talked about late-night shifts and interest rates, about the story I'd been told about my surgery, about the way I'd reassured myself for years that there had simply been nothing to give. My father wouldn't look at me. Months later, after more filings and more waiting than I thought I could stand, the judge issued an order. She found that my father, as trustee, had failed to administer certain trusts impartially among the beneficiaries. She ordered a recalculation of what my share should have been, with interest. She ordered that a specific sum, more than I'd let myself hope for, be paid to me from my father's separate assets as restitution. She declined to remove him as trustee, but admonished him, on the record, to adhere strictly to his duties going forward. In legal terms, it was measured. In emotional terms, it was seismic. When David called to tell me, I sat on my couch and stared at the wall while he read the key sections. When he finished, I let out a shaky breath. So, what does this mean? I asked. It means a court has acknowledged you were treated unfairly in a way that crossed a legal line, not just a moral one, he said. It means you're going to receive a substantial payment, and it means your father will think twice before quietly funneling funds around in the future. Will this ruin him? I asked quietly. No, David said. He's still wealthy. This isn't about putting him on the straight. It's about course correction. It wasn't revenge, not the way I'd once imagined it, but it was something solid, something real. I used part of the restitution to do the first thing I dreamed of for years. I paid off my student loans, every last cent. I logged into the servicer's website, watched the balance drop to zero, and stared at the screen as the number refused to climb back up. Paid in full. The rest I used as a down payment on a small house in a quieter neighborhood, with a narrow front porch and a yard big enough for a few trees. It wasn't a grand estate, it wasn't on the water, but it was mine. The deed had my name on it alone. For the first time in my adult life, the walls around me felt like they were holding me up instead of closing in. The last time I saw my entire family together was at Thanksgiving, in that same dining room with the portrait of my grandfather watching. The trust issue had been resolved, as my mother put it. My siblings attended, tense but present. My father sat at the head of the table, a little more lined, a little less invincible. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down. My heart pounded, but my hands were steady. I'm going to say this once, I said, my voice cutting through the small talk, and then I'm done. Everyone looked at me. My mother's eyes were already shiny. Brooke looked annoyed. Tyler looked wary. My father's expression was carved from stone. You told me my surgery at 17 wiped you out, I began. That there was nothing left for college, nothing left to help me. I carried that guilt for years. I told myself I was the reason you couldn't pay for things. I worked and I borrowed and I went without because I believed you had sacrificed everything to keep me alive. My mother's hand trembled around her wine glass. But that wasn't true, I continued. Insurance covered almost all of it. While I was working double shifts and crying over loan statements, you were opening accounts for Brooke and Tyler labeled wedding and future home. You decided I was the risk and they were the legacy. You used my scare as an excuse to cut me off from what was supposed to be mine. Natalie, that's not fair, Brooke began. I held up a hand. I'm not done. You created a trust for all three of us, I said. The documents say we were each supposed to receive a benefit at 18. When that time came, you redirected my share into vehicles you controlled and later into things that benefited them. When I asked for help, you told me I had chosen independence and had to live with the consequences. My father's jaw was clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might crack. And when I finally found out, when I stopped swallowing your story and started asking questions, you painted me as ungrateful, as vindictive, as if I had burned down the house instead of just pulling back the curtains. Tears slipped down my mother's cheeks. We never wanted you to feel this way, she whispered. You didn't want to feel guilty, I said. There's a difference. My father finally spoke, his voice low. We did what we thought was best for the family. For the family, I repeated. Not for your daughter, not for me. He looked at me, anger, and something like fear in his eyes. You were always the one who didn't need us, he said. You were determined to prove you could do everything yourself. You left for college and barely looked back. You made choices without consulting us. You wanted to be on your own. I wanted to grow up, I said, like every kid does. You were unpredictable, he continued, emotional. You scared the hell out of me when you collapsed in that kitchen. I thought we were going to lose you. Do you have any idea what that felt like? To come that close to losing a child? Yes, I said softly. I was there. I was the one on the floor. He stared at me, breathing hard. I swore I would never let one person hold that much power over the future of this family again. That's why I structured things the way I did. I couldn't risk everything on you. The words landed like stones. So instead, I said, you decided to make sure I never had power at all. It wasn't about power, he said. It was about control. Brooke shifted. Dad, maybe we should... He cut her off with a sharp gesture. If I gave you money, he said slowly, if I set you up the way I did the others, you wouldn't need me. You would leave, and you wouldn't look back. There it was, small and ugly and perfect. I let out a breath that felt like it had been lodged in my chest for years. I didn't need your money to leave, I said. I needed clarity. You just gave it to me. My mother let out a soft, broken sound. Natalie, please, we can fix this. No, I said. You can redistribute assets. You can write new wills. You can cut checks. But you can't go back and give me the years I spent drowning while you watched from the deck and told yourselves the water was good for me. I pushed back my chair. The scrape was loud in the silence. Where are you going? Tyler asked. Home, I said. This is your home, my mother said desperately. I shook my head. No, it's your house. It's their future. It was never meant to be mine. I picked up my bag. At the doorway, I paused and looked back one last time. My father sat rigid at the head of the table, his hands clenched. My mother's mascara had smeared. Brooke's mouth was a thin, angry line. Tyler looked lost. I didn't start this to destroy you, I said. I started it because I couldn't keep living inside a lie you built on my back. You taught me to survive without your help. Don't act surprised now that I'm finally doing it on purpose. Then I walked out. No one followed me. These days, my life is quieter. My house isn't huge, but it's warm. The couch doesn't sag. The dishwasher works. When it breaks someday, I'll fix it with my own money. My student loans are gone. My phone doesn't light up with calls from collectors or from my parents, and both kinds of silence feel like freedom. Sometimes I drive past my parents' neighborhood. The gates open for me automatically. The system still recognizes my old access code. I see the big house, the manicured lawn, the expensive cars in the driveway. I know that inside, my siblings are still orbiting my father, their lives linked to his approval, to his accounts, to his idea of what the family should be. They still have more money than I do. They probably always will. But when I unlock the front door to my own house at the end of the day, when I sit on my own porch with a cup of coffee and watch the sun go down over a street full of normal people with normal problems, I feel something I never felt in that mansion: peace. I used to think being cut out of the inner circle of my family meant I'd lost everything. Now I understand that what I lost was the obligation to keep playing a rigged game. They chose control. I chose myself. My name is Natalie, and this was the last straw. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe.